Hello and welcome to the podcast at the card table, in which we discuss creation, practice, performance and history with the greatest minds in magic. Today's episode is brought to you by MAGICBOX, one of the UK's leading bricks and mortar magic shops, stocking everything from Murphy's, Penguin, Theory 11, Ellusionist and so much more. And with their price match guarantee, they'll never be beaten on price. Plus, as listeners of the podcast, you'll receive 10% off your order when you use code PATCT at the checkout. That's PATCT. Check the link in the description for more details. Without further ado, let's get on to the episode. Following in Leonard Green's footsteps, today's guest has been perfecting and displaying knuckle-busting sleights online, amassing over 100,000 followers and millions of views on social media, to become known as one of the UK's leading sleight of hand artists, all while travelling the world performing and lecturing her incredible talent. It is, of course, the amazing Ashleigh Goodwin. How are we doing today, Ashleigh? You well?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. I am very well. Very chaotic life in the background with shows going on, but we are here, we are recording, and it's going to be an absolutely incredible episode. I've been looking forward to this one very much.
Me too.
Perfect. We're going to hop straight into your origin story. We're going to take this way back to when you first started magic, and we're going to divulge why magic, why specifically cards, and how did it come about?
It was kind of like a mixture of a coincidence and an accident, because I was 18 when I first started practicing magic, which isn't late to a lot of people, but to everyone who I met at the time, you know, it was kind of the story of, oh yeah, when I was a kid, I got a magic set and, you know, et cetera. Whereas that very much wasn't the case for me. I'd watched Dynamo's TV specials, and I enjoyed watching magic, but I never saw myself as pursuing it at all. But I was studying psychology in Liverpool back at home, and there's a place, there used to be it's not there anymore unfortunately, but there was like a huge building not too far from Lime Street Station that was full of independently run shops. And I was in there one day, and one of them in the very corner was like the size of the, you know, Harry Potter under the stairs kind of a shop. You could fit two people in there max, and it was a magic shop. And I was in there, and the guy was showing me card tricks, and I went home, and I was still living with my mum at the time. I was like, Mum, do we have any playing cards? She's like, oh, I think so. And, you know, it's one of those like square plastic decks of cards. I was like, yeah, that'll do. And it kind of just went from there on a tangent. I never looked back. And I don't know if it was a case of magic was introduced to me with card magic, so that's kind of what I ran with, but it was definitely what I enjoyed the most, because I did initially try like some coin stuff as well in the beginning, but cards just kind of had a grip on me from day one. And yeah, it was kind of like an instant thing, and I just ran with it and never looked back.
Yeah, I feel like, as you say, a lot of people start by just seeing magic sets or seeing magic and rolling from there. So to have coincidentally just walked into a magic shop and it being a spur of the moment thing is, yeah, for something that's essentially changed your life and what you're doing today is quite the coincidence.
It's crazy. Like, you think, if I didn't go in there on that day, what would I be doing now? Because as you said, it's life changing. So yeah.
Do you think you would have still gone down the psychological front and still have gone down that for university and then maybe moved into that, or do you think something else?
Probably not, because I'm not actually a working full-time magician. Like, I have what magicians would call a normal job. Like, I work full-time, not doing magic. Magic's kind of my like side hobby, if you like. So I don't know if I would have necessarily, but yeah, I still enjoyed studying, and I think if I could go back, I'd still do it. But yeah, it's just funny how things come out.
Obviously, as you mentioned there, this is more of a hobby, less so than like a full-time thing. Do you think that helps balance? Obviously, I feel like a lot of people, when they become full-time professionals, they rely so much on magic being their job that they sort of fall out of the passion of magic. Do you think keeping it as a hobby and keeping it totally separate to work and the sort of financial risks of it Do you think that helps to keep that passion flowing?
For me, at least, like I can't speak for anybody else because I know friends who do magic full time who would never dream about doing anything else. But for me personally, I think 100%, yeah. I love the stability of knowing that, you know, I've got my job and I can do magic on the side. And I don't know if that's because I'm like more introverted and, you know, I'm more reserved. And so maybe performing magic has always been more difficult for me. And which sounds crazy because why practice magic if you don't love performing it? And I do enjoy it, but it is something that I've always kind of struggled a little bit with. A lot more so in the beginning than now, but I think I can't, even right now, I can't imagine doing it full time because it's just kind of not the person I am. And if I pretended that that was me, I think I'd struggle equally. I think when I did a lecture recently and it was in South Tyneside and Mark Obi was there, he was lecturing as well. And he asked, like, you know, about doing the Leonard Green stuff, why you don't perform like the same character, why is that kind of thing? And because I think being an introvert, if I then tried to act like I was charismatic and, you know, that sort of a person, it just wouldn't work for me. And so I just enjoyed having that kind of comfort of if the right opportunity comes along and it's a gig that I want to work, I have the freedom, if I'm free, to say, yeah, I'll do that. But equally, if it's something that I don't really want to do, I'm free. I'm not obliged financially to say, okay, yeah, I'll work that gig, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it allows you to really take on the work that you actually enjoy doing and you want to do, and you're not forced to take on gigs for the sake of gigs, which I can imagine quite a lot of people, if gigs are a little bit slower, then they have to pick up things that they wouldn't necessarily normally do, whereas this gives you the opportunity to just do the things that you enjoy doing. And again, it means you're not sort of forcing yourself to do stuff that you don't want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to move into our quickfire section in closed brackets because it never ends up being quickfire, but it's probably best that way because otherwise it would be a very short podcast and probably wouldn't be a great listen if it was all one-word answers. But this is to allow us, if the people at home don't know who you are, we're going to learn a little few things about you, a few of your favorite things, some industry gripes, and then we will move after that into a little bit more of the details of the stuff that you've been doing in the past. So our first question in our quickfire segment is, what is your favorite sleight? I can imagine being a card magician, this is going to be a card sleight. And I don't know if you have, I think I know probably what you're going to say here.
I think
we shall see.
Who's seen anything that I've done probably knows the answer to this one. And of course, I have to say that it's the snap deal, the flux deal, you know, a mixture between the two, because it's a move that I've only been doing for 5 years, but it's completely changed my life and my magic career. Like it turned it on its head almost, even though I've been doing card magic since the get-go for like 12 years now. Discovering this move and what I could do with it is just like, I don't think without the snap deal, I would have traveled the world to lecture or performed at the likes of Blackpool. Like none of that, I don't think would have happened. And so, and it was chance that I even found it, because I was, it's a bit of an embarrassing story, but you know,
you've started it now.
At the same time, I can't think of any other way to explain it. I was watching. I just finished watching Richard Turner's Dealt on Netflix. In fact, it was like I'd rewatched it because it was just before COVID, and I thought, God, I would love to be that good. Like that's crazy. Imagine being able to do stuff like that with a deck of cards. Like wow. And I was kind of just sat at my table, and because I couldn't at the time do any like fancy deals or anything, I think I was trying to do a second deal, but I had no idea what I was doing. I was just kind of trying to figure it out myself. And I did the deal, and it didn't work, but something else happened instead. And I thought, oh, that looked cool. So I like recorded a shot of it, posted it on social media, and people were commenting like, oh, great snap deal. Oh no, I think someone messaged me saying, oh, great snap deal. And I was like, what's that? So I looked it up, and it was actually Takumi Takahashi's socials that came up first. And so I looked through his stuff, and I was like, wow, that's real magic. Like, how is this even possible? And so, you know, I bought a few of his things. I got chatting to him and started practicing the move, and it went from there. I found out a few months later that he was lecturing in Blackpool in 2020, and I was umming and ahhing whether or not to go, because being the introvert that I was and am, a lot of my friends that I normally go to the convention with couldn't make it that year. And so I was like, wow, it's a pretty daunting place to like go by yourself.
Very overwhelming.
While, like, you know, outgoing, it's still quite daunting. And so I was like, oh, I don't know. But I knew that he was going to be lecturing there, and I thought, if I don't go, I'll regret this. So I went, and I remember standing in the lecture hall, and all of the chairs from front to back were full, and people were standing at the back and around the sides. And so I stood on the side and watched the whole thing. And I just, as soon as it finished, I was like running to the back to grab this DVD that he was selling. And I thought, yeah, this is like what I didn't realize at the time that I'd been like waiting for something that I was like really kind of passionate about in card magic to do. But it's like something just clicked, and I knew that this was a style of magic that I really, really wanted to pursue. And once I got the DVD, went home, started practicing it. Obviously, COVID struck pretty much immediately after. And so the job that I have, I was at home. Like I wasn't working during a lot of COVID. So all of a sudden I had all of this free time on my hands to practice this quite difficult move. And so I think that helped in a way, that I didn't have any distractions because I had nothing else to do. I thought, right, I'll get settled and really practice this move.
It seems like a lot of your magical journey was based on happenstance and good timings.
Yeah, right. It's crazy.
Like everything's sort of fallen into place, and it's just sort of rolled, and it's come to where it has today. When you were learning sorry, what were you saying?
A big believer in fate after all of this.
Yeah, you can't put this down to just random happenstance. Like everything has to have been done for a reason, and it's all fallen into place perfectly.
Yeah.
When you were learning before, obviously, you'd found this, what resources were you using? You mentioned there that you'd obviously watched Richard Turner's Dealt. Were you using the likes of YouTube? Were you reading books? How did you sort of get to that point before you started discovering these different types of movements?
So in the very beginning, because I'd been introduced to magic at this magic shop, I kind of became friends with because we were all around about the same age, and all based in Liverpool at the time. So we'd meet up regularly, and because they had a lot more experience and knowledge in magic than I did, they would teach me a few things, and then I'd go away and kind of do my own research. I think one of the first magicians that I kind of bought the material was Daniel Madison. I bought a lot of his books, and I think his cards were the first kind of like fashion deck that I owned, because I bought a bicycle deck obviously, but I think I had one bicycle deck and then I had one white Madison Rounders deck, and they were like my two decks at the time. And so I started learning from like those type of resources here and there, but a lot of it I would say came from like the friendship group at the time, because obviously I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, because they were doing like these amazing classic passes, and I was like, whoa, what's that? But I couldn't just jump in at the deep end. I was trying to learn how to do a double lift and, was struggling with that. So I had to kind of ease my way into it. And there were a few, I think YouTube is pretty good for like basic beginner card magic if you want to learn a double lift, an easy force, or, that kind of thing. I know a lot of people disagree with that, and I've got a few things I think to say about it myself, but I think as long as it's a beginner move and, a double lift, teaching someone how to do that is, I don't see the problem with it, but because that's what I use, and so it'd be a bit hypocritical of me to say, oh, you've got to keep every single magic secret, because I don't know where I would have been without those simple tutorials.
Yeah, certainly. I think YouTube's been fundamental, especially when I started learning as well. It was sort of the go-to thing. If I didn't necessarily have the money to purchase a book or a DVD, or I was saving up, it gave me an opportunity to sort of dip my toes into those movements and into those sleights without like fully committing to it. And then when I was like, maybe I do really want to learn this thing, I then went to that resource, or I went to that book and I bought it, and then I really studied it and honed it in. But much like anything, I think a lot of people often complain about YouTube because there are a lot of incorrect techniques taught on there.
Yeah.
I think you find the same in books and DVDs. If it's not like the original resource, most people adapt and change things for how they work best for themselves. So when you're learning from somebody who's learned it from somebody else anyway,
Yeah.
irrespective, you're still getting like a second-hand account of what that movement should look like.
I think the problem that I have with it is that in the beginning, social media wasn't really about all of that, but now I think for people to try and grow a social media account in Magic specifically, it's become so easy to release a tutorial for like clickbait to get a few extra views, follows, whatever. And I think even if you're going to go down that route, there's a respectful way to go about it, especially if what you're teaching isn't a basic sleight, like a double lift or something. If it's a released effect and you're looking to gain a few views from exposing methods, like that is something that really like gets on my nerves. And so I think the right way to go about doing these kind of tutorials on social media, and a wrong way. Like I've done a cardistry tutorial myself, but before I even recorded it or thought about going any further with it, the first thing I did was reach out to the person who created the move and said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. I've seen other people have done tutorials. Would you be okay if I did one as well? And, wanted to know if they were okay with it first. They said yes. And so I knew that I was okay to go ahead with it. I shared what I'd done with them before I posted it. And then after that, they said that there was no issue. But I think it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because where do you draw the line of what
Yeah, it's just a level of common courtesy, though. Like, if it's somebody else's thing, especially if it's something that they're selling and they're making money from it, which is then supporting their family and supporting their career and what they're doing, I feel like it's incredibly disrespectful to then just go and... I think a lot of these, especially exposure videos online, aren't even sort of tutorials. They're more just, here is how the trick is done.
Yeah.
Now you know. Which is even more frustrating, because then it's not for educational purposes. It's not for the benefit of those who are potentially wanting to get into Magic. It is purely just for likes and money and their own gain, which is incredibly selfish on their part, and it really damages the community.
Yeah.
I think done correctly, like you say, obviously if you're approaching the person that has created the move, or if you're using resources that are now sort of public access, like old books and things like that, there's a problem with that, because at the end of the day, like we've said, without YouTube, I don't think a lot of people would get into Magic, because I think a lot of people, especially younger children now, are utilizing YouTube to learn their first Magic tricks, and then from there they start realizing there's online videos, tutorials, there's other websites like Ellusionist, there's Magic Shop, bricks and mortar, which is again another massive thing. And it was all because they'd seen something on YouTube and it stemmed from there. So without it, maybe it stints the progress, but at the same time, there's two very far ends of that spectrum, and they're a little bit difficult to balance.
Either, because it's like there could be someone who has, just learned a move and thought, this is good. It's a basic, I'll teach it. But I've seen videos of certain sleights being taught, not necessarily like incorrectly, but, more difficult moves like a snap deal. A lot of people have tagged me in, exposure videos of where, like you say, it's not necessarily a tutorial. It's just like, look, this is how it's done. And they're performing it so badly. And I don't know if that's just because I'm so deeply like connected to the move. Is that just me being fussy that I'm like, oh, but you're doing it wrong? Or is that another issue where, people might be turning to these videos instead of magic books or, buying the resources online and learning it that way, but then it's damaging them in a sense because they're going to have to at some point go back and try to relearn it. And I think, especially with card magic, if it's like a muscle memory type of knacky sleight, you've got to then try and unlearn that. And I think that would be quite difficult.
It's incredibly difficult. When I first learned to bottom deal, I learned to bottom deal pulling from the front. And then when I learned to second deal, obviously I'm dealing from the side, and I wanted my bottom deals to look the same as my second deals and my normal deals. So I then had to completely unlearn how to bottom deal and then relearn how to bottom deal from a normal sort of mechanic script, which was an absolute nightmare. So I can attest to that one 100%. Learn from a good resource because it's a game changer. We're going to move on to the next question, which is, do you have a particular favorite plot in Magic? This doesn't necessarily have to be something that you perform. This could be something that you enjoy watching, but is there a particular favorite plot that you enjoy?
It's probably too broad of a spectrum to say that I really enjoy like gambling demonstrations. It's not really something that I do myself, but I think anything where you're watching someone sat at a table and they're doing those, the table shuffles, and then they spread the cards and it's all in, new deck order. And I'm like, what? But I love stuff like an ace assembly, those kind of routines. And I don't think I really do any kind of gambling style routines myself, but it is something that very recently, I've thought about moving towards, because in the beginning I kind of thought that, all of my friends were doing magic based routines and I loved watching it. And so I thought, I like card magic, so this is what I'm going to learn as well. But I kind of wasn't really enjoying it as much. And so when I found the snap deal, obviously like even gambling routines, it's still kind of magic because you're still aiming for that kind of wow factor at the end, how to do that kind of response. But I don't know, there's something about that style of card magic that kind of draws me towards it more. So I don't know why I've never, like, I can't second deal, I can't center deal, I can't bottom deal, even though my first book was what's it called, How to Cheat at Cards, Daniel Madison's book, and that's all, like heavy gambling type sleights. And so I don't know why I've never tried it, but I love watching anything to do with that kind of stuff.
Do you think that stems from the appreciation of understanding the movement that goes into it and understanding the skill and the level of dexterity that it takes, obviously, from the other movements that you're learning and cardistry and things like that? It then comes down to being able to look at a routine such as a gambling demonstration with false shuffles and various different gambling cuts and things like that, and you can appreciate just to the level that they've gone to get to where they are. Do you think it's down to that?
I definitely think that I appreciate it. I mean, ever since when I started and first bought that book and I opened it and I saw all of the kind of the palming techniques and all that kind of stuff, I thought, whoa, that's way too scary. Like I would never try that. Definitely not live, like it's, but now since kind of trying the Leonard Green stuff and, notoriously heavy on the palms and, a lot of people are scared of, what kind of angles there might be. And I think since learning all of that stuff, I can appreciate like the amount of work that goes into all of that more. And so maybe that plays a factor. I don't know, but I've definitely always kind of, it's one of them. Because I love mentalism. I love all of Darren Brown's stuff. I can't do any of it. So do I enjoy going to Darren Brown's shows because I'm so wowed because I don't know how it's done? Like, am I appreciating all of these gambling routines because I've not done any of it before? I might know a few sleights of like, what might be going on, but ultimately it's that question of like, have you ever bought a magic trick where someone's demoed it to you and you think, wow, that's incredible, and then you buy it and you read up on how it's done and you're like, oh, okay.
Yep.
I
think everyone has that drawer full of magic stuff where they've gone, that looks phenomenal, and you get it and go, oh, that's a bit disappointing. And then it just gets thrown in a drawer and it's never sees the light of day again, or it ends up on secondhand magic about 3 days later.
Yeah, so maybe that plays a small part in that, because I've never done any, well, I've tried, but I've never been successful at learning any like really cool table false shuffles and stuff. So obviously I know I've tried to learn, so I know what I'm supposed to do, but maybe it's because I can't do it that I think, wow, that's really cool.
Do you think, obviously you do a lot of cardistry, which is a lot of finger dexterity. Why do you think you pick up cardistry easier than the likes of table shuffles or deals and things like that? Is it purely because you enjoy the learning process more for cardistry, or is it just that you've not really given the opportunity or the time to focus on those different things?
I think of it like similar to magic, cardistry has branches where there's like beginner stuff and more difficult stuff, and it's kind of like in the beginning it was quite easy because I'd started with magic first, and so then I started trying to learn a few cardistry moves, and because I was already used to holding a deck of cards, the simple stuff was fairly easy, but then it was moving on to the more difficult stuff where you're holding cards in positions that feel really weird and unnatural, and like they keep flying out of your hands and you're like, I'm never gonna get this. And I think in that sense, cardistry is actually, for me at least, has been more difficult, because I think personally I've spent more time trying to nail cardistry flourishes and been unsuccessful. It's took me a longer period of time to kind of nail something than in magic. And I don't know if that's because because I'm not a working magician, maybe I've put more time into cardistry in some circumstances because there's no pressure that, I need to learn this move because I want to perform this routine. And I'm also like, I'm a bit of a fidgeter anyway, so I always, if I'm sat watching the TV, like normally I've got a pack of cards or something in my hands, and cardistry, if you've got nothing in front of you, it's easy to kind of play with cards in that sense. Whereas if I was practicing a card routine, I might need a table or, something. I'm limited to where I can practice it, whereas cardistry, I'm not. So maybe that's played a part as well.
Yeah, I think one of the best bits of advice I was ever given in terms of what you just said there with fidgeting whilst watching TV and things like that is, if you can make, again, this might be something that you do, if you can make those sort of impulsive little fidget moves something that you're trying to learn,
Yeah.
because you're not focusing on it, like whether it be second deals or whether it be something like that, you can just sit and subconsciously do it whilst watching TV or doing something else. It allows you to spend so much time just doing it subconsciously that you can get in so many repetitions without even realizing, because you're doing other things, and you don't necessarily have to sit down and just focus on that one move and spend hours at it. You can gain those extra hours elsewhere because you're just doing them without realizing. So every so often I'll try and change it so my little fidget, my little go-to fidget is something that I'm striving to get better, whether it be a second deal or a double lift or some sort of flourish. And then it makes it a faster process because you can fidget all the time.
Yeah. I just bought actually. I don't, other than a few of Daniel Madison's books, a few of my friends' books, I've not really read many magic books, and so I bought Jason's from Vanishing Ink recently.
Oh, nice.
I want to get more into the gambling stuff. I thought, well, why not? I'll treat myself.
Which perfectly segues into our next question, which is, what is your favorite book?
In both of the books, it talks about like how the pinky count is a really important move to him and of what he does. And so for the past few days, I've been sat with a deck of cards trying to learn how to do this move. And like you say, like I've been sat watching the cricket all day trying to like do this move, and it is easier to practice when you're not just sat there in a room of silence and looking at you, trying to frustrating yourself because you can't do it at first. You're kind of keeping your mind occupied and trying to do it in the background. I think I definitely do that as well.
Yeah, it creates a good muscle memory practice as well. You're not,
because
I feel like a lot of the time I've noticed I have a show when I am practicing. I tend to blink when I do a sleight, which is not good at all, because I look at a sleight and I go, that's fantastic, that looks great. And it's like, well, yeah, of course it is, because your eyes were closed for the 10 seconds that you were doing it. So that's one thing that I really need to focus on when I'm actually practicing. I'm sitting there with my eyes like burning the cards, not blinking until I've done what I need to. Whereas when I'm doing it just like sitting, chilling, doing whatever I'm doing, whether it's watching the TV or something like that, or editing, I can just sit and fidget and my brain's not focusing on it.
Yeah.
And then it learns subconsciously, and it means when I come to actually doing the sleight or performing, it's ready to go without me even thinking about it. And then it allows us the time and mental space that I need to figure out what I'm saying and actually holding a conversation with somebody, which I find incredibly difficult.
It's good that you say that, because I've got this like a similar tell where when I do a move that I'm like practicing, my lip and my chin do this weird move, and I've like gone back when I was looking through my social media videos for like a clip we could talk about later. I was like watching a few of them, and I could see my chin, like, oh no.
Now everybody that's watching this on YouTube is going to be looking for that tell later on in the video. See if you can spot it.
Yeah.
What do you have a particular favorite book? Obviously, you mentioned that you're not a particularly big collector of books, and most of the stuff that you have read is either Madison's works, which is actually where I started, and I have the first deck of rounders I ever bought is currently framed on my wall, and they were my favorite decks as well. Do you have a particular favorite, whether it's a friend's book or whether it's something that you keep going back to?
I think it might be like a bit of a boring answer because it feels kind of cliche, but like something like Expert at the Card Table. I'm a card person, so if I had to pick something, then that's where my mind goes to. But I'm looking to read a few more books, so maybe I'll have a more interesting answer in the future.
Expert at the Card Table is also mine. So even after reading a multitude of books and getting recommendations on this podcast, still come back to that all the time. Yeah. And it's just one of those things. I think it was such a fundamental book as well in terms of instruction. It was the first book to have lots of hand-drawn images. It wasn't just a single image every 30 pages, which was an absolute nightmare, especially if you're learning difficult gambling sleights, like the stuff that's taught in there. So I think it was quite the turning point, and I think for that reason it also has like a historical point of view that makes it more, I don't know, it just stands out more in my mind. It's one of those like fundamental books.
Like drawn into the whole mystery of it all, because today, if someone was releasing such like a powerful piece of work, it'd be a magician that was like oh, and this is my release and I can do this. And,
Yeah.
you know, not maybe not, but, you know, more likely in my head, I imagine them to have like a big ego and be like, yeah, I'm the best. And whereas this, you know, whoever it is just
Disappeared into the wild.
Yeah.
And one of I mean, there's been a multitude of different sort of documentaries and docuseries on the expert at the card table and who the writer could have been, and the documentaries are so interesting, and some of the theories, like when you really get into a rabbit hole of like who SW ERDNASE could possibly have been, some of the theories and conspiracies are just absolutely wild.
Yeah.
Some of which, maybe he was a murderer, maybe he was a criminal. Like, I don't really want to think about it that way, because I get a lot of slights from that guy. That's probably not the best person to have as your role model in life. Do you have a particular favorite performance? Obviously, you mentioned the likes of Darren Brown and going to see his shows. Whether it's a magic performance, it could be something mentalism related. I know you do dance or have done dance in the past. It could be something dance or theatre related. Do you have a particular favorite performance that stands out in mind?
I think for me, I would also have to say Leonard Green's PATCT in 1988. Like watching that, because I mean, it sounds ridiculous, right? But I was introduced to the snap deal by Takumi, his student and good friend. Like I didn't, at the time of learning the snap deal, I didn't know who Leonard Green was. And so I kind of learned his name later on. And it sounds, even for me saying now, that sounds crazy now, knowing who he is and what he's done. You know, it's like, I almost feel bad for saying it, but watching that FISM act for the first time and kind of seeing where the move came from and the story behind it was like, I don't know, it felt special. And I've watched it so many times since and still get the same kind of reaction from it. And so I think for me, hands down, I'd have to say that one, because even though it's, you know, I love all of the sleights and all of the moves that he does. And I've tried to not mimic them because I think I do it in a slightly different way, but his performance style, even though it's not in a million years anything that I would try to do myself, I think it's so different to a lot of stuff that you see today where it's like purposefully chaotic and you know, that kind of thing. I'd never, because even the way Takumi performs the snap deal, I would say it's closer to the way that I use it in a more like polished kind of performance. And so watching Leonard Green do it in his like unique way was like, yeah, just really special.
Yeah, I absolutely love that style of chaos that Leonard, Danny the Ortiz, Mark Kobe, like obviously being well versed in magic, as I imagine it is with yourself, when you're watching card sleights and stuff, you can appreciate the skill that's going into it and you can see what's happening. Sometimes when I'm watching the likes of Mark Kobe, it's really difficult to follow what's going on because I'm looking for the techniques as they're written and as they've been taught. I'm not looking for the techniques in this crazy, chaotic, spill the cards everywhere, take a crisp kind of fashion. Like, I can't follow along with what's happening. And yeah, it's such a fresh start.
I think that it's an accident as well. The way that he does it, it's done formed to such an extent that you think that's the way he really is. But then when you speak to him in person, like you realize just how skilled he is and how difficult must it be to, you know, spill the cards like that and make it look like an accident when it's actually on purpose. It's
all calculated to the finest detail, and it's infuriating how good he can be at being bad while still being good. Like, that shouldn't be a thing. That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, it's the same with Leonard. It's just absolutely stunning to watch. And again, it's not a performance style that you commonly see. Those are probably the only sort of three people that spring to mind immediately with that style. And it's difficult to replicate that because it's a whole different pattern. As you said earlier, you have to relearn everything because you're not performing them like they were taught. You're not performing them in the same environment. It's just absolute carnage. And again, I think that brings a level of appreciation for what they were doing as well. How far after initially discovering the snap deal was it that you then became sort of known to Leonard's work and started studying that?
I don't think it was too soon after, because I went to see the lecture at Blackpool. I bought the Takumi's like DVD release where he teaches the move and a bunch of routines that he uses it for. And I think it was kind of while I was watching that, he mentions Leonard Green. Obviously, it's on the DVD, and so I kind of read up about him myself. And then after I'd watched the DVD, I'd learned the stuff and was comfortable with it, but I kind of wanted to do more in this style. I wanted to, try and think about, because it's one of those moves that you can, it's not just for one routine, you can do so much with it. It's crazy. So I thought there must be more out there, and who better to learn from than the guy himself, right? So I spoke to Takumi, and he pointed me in the direction of the old green magic DVDs.
Yeah.
It's like
Phenomenal DVD set.
There's like 4 DVDs in each, and there's so much content. Like, it's for the price that when you look at it on, because I think I bought it from, I don't know, Vanishing Ink or something. When you look at the price, initially it seems like, wow, that's quite expensive. But then when you look at what you're getting from that DVD, it's crazy. Like, you could charge way more for it. I would have paid a lot more. Like,
there's like several lifetimes worth of
right?
material on just one of the 4 DVD set. Like, the amount of content in there is absolutely absurd. And as you mentioned,
just on false shuffles, nothing else, like a whole DVD's worth. It's crazy.
you could spend so much time and still not even scratch the surface on false shuffles. It's ridiculous. And like you said with the snap deal as well, when you start learning the different applications, like I've seen you snap deal with coins, like the level of detail and intricacies that you can go down those different avenues into different places is just ridiculous. And then to have that for everything that Leonard does, like everything can be broken down and applied into various different things, is just absurd.
Yeah, I think it speaks for itself when you think, obviously Leonard Green is a lot more than the snap deal. That's just kind of one of the sleights that he's most well known for. So it kind of speaks for itself that when you think of Leonard Green, you think of the snap deal, even though he's done like so much more that he could be equally famous for just in its own right. For that one move to like speak so loudly about that, I think it kind of, it shows you how good it is, and it still stands the test of time today because he first performed it. Well, I don't think it was his first performance when he did FISM, but that was 1988, and I picked it up 5 years ago, and I will scream to the rooftops that everyone interested in card magic should think about learning this move, because there's so much that you can do with it. And so, yeah.
We're going to take a little bit of a detour here. We've touched a little bit on this, and we're going to go down the avenue of what is your magic industry gripe. Obviously, you mentioned before that sort of exposure videos is something that you don't particularly enjoy. Is there anything else in the magic industry or the magic communities that you don't think particularly deserves a place in the community, whether it's something that you think is overdone, or whether it's things in the past we've had, like piracy is obviously a massive thing, egos within the community? Is there anything that you'd like to sort of bring to light that you don't think potentially belongs in the magic community?
I think because a lot of what I've done is on kind of a social media front, I think it's not even necessarily only in the magic community, but like the kind of, I don't even know if I'd call it bullying, but like, you could be performing like I do. I perform on social media for fun. It's my way of like showing people what I could do, or at least that's where I came from in the beginning. And the amount of times that I've had messages that's like people trying to tell me, oh no, you're not doing this, you're doing that, and or I don't really know how to put it into words. It's kind of like
unnecessary like advice. I think unsolicited advice is a big one.
And
I
I
think
get a lot where people are like, message me and I'll teach you how to do Snapdeal properly. And I'm like, dude, I don't think people would ask me to like lecture on this move. I could do it well. Like, I think I know what I'm doing, but
yeah, you've literally learned from the source
yeah,
himself. Like you can't have learned from a better place. It's not like you just pulled it off of Instagram and been like, I'm gonna blast this move and see how it goes. Like you went to the guy
yeah.
and you learned from there. So yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people tend to be very opinionated, even though the stuff that you're doing is absolutely phenomenal. The amount of work that goes into it, like we mentioned before this started, the amount of work that goes in behind the scenes just to record a video and to make sure angles are correct and lighting, and then you've got to match it with music and you've got to make sure the take was good and you're not flashing anything. Like
I,
it's just absurd.
I'm open to, constructive criticism because I've took it on board in the past where people have messaged me with like genuine, like, I love what you do, kind of like polite introduction, but like, I've seen that you do this, and maybe if you try this, then blah, blah, blah. And it's genuinely helped me like perform the move better. And so I've messaged them and said, thank you so much for taking the time to tell me this because it's genuinely helped me become better at it. But as you say, like sometimes it's not that, I've got a thick skin from doing social media for the last 10 years or so, but yeah, sometimes I think it's just unnecessary and people are doing it to just have a go.
Yeah, there's a way to go about giving advice. You can still be friendly and supportive. Doesn't necessarily have to be, by the way, you're doing this wrong. I know how to do it better. Here is my advice. You can still be like, look, you're doing incredible. Have you tried this? Or those kinds of things where it can be supportive. Because obviously, learning comes from that support within the community. And obviously, bouncing ideas off each other can be incredibly helpful. But as you say, if somebody's just come in with that shit, here's how to do it properly, it's not really the nicest way to go about it, is it?
It's not even so much from my videos anymore because I tend to just delete it and think, I'm not going to pay any mind to people who are just intentionally trying to grab my attention in that way. But seeing it, because I'm older now and there are obviously, a lot of younger magicians who are using social media, seeing people comment on their videos that are really unkind, unnecessary stuff is where it really kind of frustrates a lot of people, I think, because, there's kids on Britain's Got Talent who are doing things that I would be terrified myself to do. And people are commenting like just unnecessary, unkind comments on their videos. And, it might be managed by their parents and hopefully they don't see it. But I just think, as a community, because these people are 9 times out of 10 other magicians in the industry, like, it's frustrating to see, but it's social media, and I don't think that is going to go away anytime soon completely.
Yeah, I think people sharp forget where they came from and where they
Yeah,
started, because some of the kids nowadays, especially in the cardistry world, my goodness, they're doing stuff I could never dream of doing. So for them to be able to put in the time and effort to bring that talent to the table, I think it's disrespectful more so to think like to forget that you were in that position at one point. I think understanding that you came from that same place, you're almost in a bias of knowing, and therefore you think you know better, which I think's a very toxic thing. And as you say, especially for the younger people, if their accounts are being managed by their parents and there's that bit of gatekeeping, perfect. But if a kid sees something like that, that could be the difference between them continuing their hobby and really making something of it, them just
yeah.
completely stopping, because it's, at the end of the day, is an adult literally calling out a kid for being shit. Like, come on.
I
It's
probably
not a school playground. Like, we're not about that anymore.
one sat at the computer who's jealous that this kid has more success than they have,
Yeah.
but if, like you say, if the kid reads that and doesn't see it that way, it could be quite damaging.
Sort yourselves out, Magic community. Do
Yeah.
better. But not everyone's like that. 99% of the community is incredibly supportive and help push that forward. But it is that minority that are potentially damaging the future of Magic, even if it's people like ourselves or older generation, but especially the younger generation. It could be potentially incredibly damaging for what they're doing going forwards. And at the end of the day, they are the future of Magic.
Yeah.
So without us being supportive and without us helping them, there is no future in Magic. So sort your shit out, Magic community. We're going to move on to one final part of the quickfire segment before we delve a little bit deeper into what you do, and that is your influences. I could probably name at least the first two on this list, but if you had to name about 5 or 6 people, who would you say were your major influences or are your major influences in what you do today?
I would say, first and foremost, absolutely Leonard Green has to be up there. Because of how I learned it, also Takumi Takahashi, because he's kind of, even Leonard Green himself has said that Takumi's gone above and beyond where he was and has done more with the move. So definitely watching his stuff, I think I've took more influence from, maybe. From where I started in card magic, I think I would have to say the likes of Daniel Madison as well. Richard Turner, watching Del, I might not be able to do any of the stuff that he can, but it kind of motivated me to be like, I need to sit down with a deck of cards today and learn something. I think that can be an influence as well. If you watch someone perform and you think, wow, I might not learn that, but I need to, pick something else up.
Even to have a percentage of Richard Turner's ability would be game changing. And the amount of effort that he puts into learning all day, every day, like no matter what he's doing. In the Delt documentary, he has some pretty revealing stories about inappropriate times when he's been practicing with cards. And to go to that extent, it really shows, it sort of inspires you to really push the amount of effort that you're putting in, because you think if somebody's willing to put in that amount of effort, it's only right and respectful to put in even 10% of that amount to get to like that level.
When I'm sitting watching the documentary and I don't have a pack of cards in my hands, it makes you feel guilty, like I'm not doing anything.
Scarpering around the room looking for a deck of cards. Incredible. Obviously, you're probably best known for the notoriously difficult sleight of hand that you post on social media. Where did the obsession come from? Obviously, you mentioned it started in the card shop and worked through from there. And how do you go about practicing productively? Because it's one thing to just sit down at a table with a deck of cards and hope that you're learning, but to actually have a productive practice session, which I can imagine from time to time doesn't necessarily happen, but how do you best go about practicing in a productive and useful way?
So I think the kind of obsession with the more technically demanding sleights came from, again, maybe it plays a part that I'm not doing this as a job. I'm doing it purely for fun. Like, I do work the occasional gig, but there's no kind of pressure. And so when I'm sitting down to practice, I've always enjoyed the more challenging stuff, because it feels like, I don't know if it's like the challenge that I enjoy or just that I do enjoy practicing in general. I know that a lot of my friends who are working magicians don't really enjoy the practicing side as much. I don't think they hate it, but it's not like something that they would necessarily do for fun on a Saturday afternoon if they didn't have to,
Yeah, it's difficult working gigs all day and then coming home and being like, I need to sit down and smash out this sleight for the next 3 hours.
Yeah,
like the last thing you want to do.
I could quite easily sit at my desk for 6 hours practicing something, and that would be like a good time for me. And so I think in terms of what makes good practice, what makes bad practice, I think it's, as annoying as it will be to hear, I think it kind of depends on the person, because the way I look at it is, you know, if you were at school or university and you're studying, I've got a twin brother, for example, and I was the kind of kid at school that studied relentlessly for the exams. You know, I was at home every night doing my homework. You know, walls were covered in mind maps before exams, and, you know, I worked really, really hard. And I did okay, like, you know, I didn't get bad grades, whereas my brother didn't study at all, and he came out with, you know, A's, smashed it out the park kind of thing. And so I think it kind of depends, because someone might benefit from studying like I did, where you're like, you know, drawing things out and doing a lot of work, whereas other people might not benefit from doing it the same way. And so I think in terms of practice in magic, you might get someone who would benefit from sitting down for an hour, having a go, you know, kind of chill, and they've done their bit for the day. Whereas I would benefit more from, you know, like you said before, kind of switching off a little bit and practicing while you're watching the TV, or sitting down, no noise, focused, working on a move. So I think it kind of depends on what you think you would benefit from the most. For me personally, I think it's kind of a mixture of all of them. Like if it's a difficult move that I really want to learn, I have no trouble sitting down and kind of focusing, and I won't find that boring at all, just doing this move over and over, you know, looking at all the different angles. I have one of the 3-way practice mirrors that I use for all of that stuff. It helps with, you know, angle sensitive kind of sleights. And I think it also makes it more fun, because when you're practicing and you've got the mirror set up, you kind of see what it would look like from the spectator's point of view. And so maybe that helps me when I have like a long session. It's kind of fun to watch it work while I'm practicing it, and, you know, tweak it and however I want to. But it's probably a dull answer, but I do think it kind of depends on what each individual would benefit from the most.
Yeah, everyone learns in completely different ways. Like, as you mentioned there, I was definitely not the studying kind of person as a kid. I couldn't sit down and like read books and actually revise, and I would just a day beforehand cram as much as I physically could and hope and pray for the best. And magic certainly changed my perspective on how to go about practicing, but at the same time, I still need to sit and like actually be stimulated. If I'm just mindlessly doing the same move over and over again, my brain immediately is just like, I'd prefer just a little jam session, and then I go off into a variety of other things and I don't actually get anything done. But like you said there, with the likes of a trifold mirror or with the likes of a phone, obviously recording things, you get the opportunity to watch it back and see from different angles and things like that. And it creates like a feedback loop. Because at the end of the day, one of the great things about recording especially is you get an immediate feedback. You get that feedback loop immediately. You get that gratification of either looks good, ready to go, keep practicing it that way, or looks terrible, gonna have to switch it up, but you know immediately. Whereas if you're posting on social media and things like that, that feedback loop is significantly longer. Or if you're just sort of practicing and hoping, that feedback loop is significantly longer, because you're just waiting till the next time you do it or the next time you perform to find out whether it works, to find out whether somebody's caught it or things like that. So I think, as you say there, being able to practice with some method of being able to see what you're doing, whether it be mirrors, whether it be your phone, is a great way to start, and then
actually, like,
finding what works best.
Sorry, now that you mention it, like, one of my, in fact, the most popular video that I've ever had on social media was a video of me dropping cards for like 30 seconds.
God.
Like,
Yeah.
And I didn't create that video with the intention of like, people will enjoy watching this. Originally, it was more for me, because I was trying to learn the top shot, And it's a move that I'd wanted to get down even before I got into the Leonard Green stuff, because I didn't know that that was his, like, a move that he created. I remember it was maybe even as far back as when I was kind of practicing a lot of Daniel Madison stuff, that I'd seen people do this move and I thought that looks really cool, just to like be able to do it. Maybe I wouldn't use it, but you know, as a magic and cardistry thing, it was kind of a mixture of both that I thought that's really cool. And so I tried to learn it, and for the longest time I wasn't getting anywhere with it. I wasn't making any progress. I'd get it one time, and then the next time I tried it would be, you know, I wouldn't come close, and I'd sit there for hours and just it wasn't working. And so I thought, I've never fully committed to trying to learn this move. I've kind of had a go and thought, I can't do it, I'll move on to something else. And that's how it had always been up to this point. And so I thought, as a way to really try and get it down once and for all, because I really wanted to learn how to do it, I thought I'll kind of practice it for 10, 15 minutes, however long I can every day, for as long as it takes for me to get it down. And then if I'm doing these little videos every day, I'll save it to a little file and I can like see if I'm actually making any progress. It's, if you just sit there one day and try and do something and then sit there the next day and try and do it, because you're doing it day after day, it's hard to know if you're actually getting anywhere with it. Whereas I thought, if I stitch all these little clips together, it won't take me very long, and I can see if maybe I'll see where I'm going wrong with it, or, you know, maybe if I do get better, at least if it's going to take me 2 years to learn how to do it, I'll know that I'm at least getting somewhere. And so it'll kind of give me that boost of like, I'll stick with it because, you know, it's working. It's slow, but I'll get it eventually. And it ended up taking a month of doing it every day. And I started watching the videos back, and I started catching it more often. And I thought, like, this is actually working here. I'm actually getting the hang of it. And so in the end, I thought, like, I'll put them all together and I'll post it on social media, because I think one of the things that a lot of people have commented on to me, whether it's been a message or in a comment, is that I kind of don't shy away from when I do make a mistake. I think it's it's nice to watch content that's relatable. But, you know, if you're seeing people do difficult cardistry moves and they drop a few cards, it kind of gives you that boost of like, oh, you know, they're really good at what they do, but they drop the cards as well. So that means that, you know, I should stick with it. You know, it kind of gives you that boost. And so I thought, you know, if whether it's the Top Shot or something completely different, if someone's trying to learn something and they're not really seeing the progress that they want, and maybe they're thinking about giving up completely and moving on to something else, if they see this video, it might be like, you know, it might just take a bit longer. I don't know. I just thought it would be a nice, cute video that people could watch. And then it ended up blowing up, and I was like, wow, you know, that's what I want to watch, you know, dropping cards.
Like you say, it's that relatability, and it's an insight that you don't often get to see. Like we mentioned with social media in general, the most common thing that you see on social media is a finished product. You don't get to see the hours of progress, all of the meticulous retakes, the cards dropped and picked back up, the searching for hours for the correct music, the editing. Like, you just get to see this polished, perfect product. And as you say, it's great for people to see that those people in those positions that look like these, that have these perfect moves and always hit these sleights, do still mess up. And it's a nice little rain check to say, look, it might be difficult now, but if you stick at it, this is the level that you're going to get to. And it's a nice, like, boost of confidence to see that it's not always going great. Because I know certainly when I'm working on new stuff, I'm just sat there like, this is never going to happen. And then seeing other people be like, I also thought that, but it happened. It's nice to see. Are there any moves that are still sort of taking their time, that you still really want to get to the level of the top shot that you're working on, that are still sort of escaping your grasp?
Yeah, I think I've always really wanted to be able to do a like table false shuffle. You know, the ones that I mean, I've watched people do it, and I'm like, I really want to get that down, but every time I've tried, I've kind of come close and it's been a bit sloppy, and I've just ended up moving on to something else. So I think I'm going to try to get back at that and learn a few table shuffles that I can use.
Is there a certain point that you get to when you're learning something where you're like, I'm gonna shelf this for a little bit and work on something else, or is it just sort of what you're enjoying at the time and what's sort of fitting your enjoyment?
I think again it comes back to it being like more of a hobby, in that if I'm practicing something for a few days and I'm not really getting anywhere with it, if I get to the point where I'm like frustrated and it's not fun anymore, then I'll just be like, well, you know, there's so much to learn that, you know, I'm never going to be able to learn it all. So I'll just move on to something else for now. And I always have the plan in the back of my head that I'll come back to this next week and, you know, pick it back up then. But I'm sat at the table with my cards trying to learn different things so often that it's kind of hard to come back to everything. So I end up forgetting, and then, you know, months later I'll be like, oh yeah, I was trying to learn that, and, you know, try again. So
Do you maintain like a journal or anything for what you're practicing, or do you just sort of roll with it and see what you're enjoying and what feels good at the time?
Yeah, I don't actually, but I think that's a really good idea. I probably should, you know, keep a little notebook of stuff that I'd like to come back to eventually, because especially now that I'm trying to learn more like sleights and things that I could use in gambling type demonstrations, like that style of magic, if you will. There's so much that I feel like I need to learn that I don't currently know how to do, that I might start writing a little list and, you know, checking it off as I go.
Yeah, I also need to do that because there's so many things. Like if a new effect comes out, or I'm reading a book and I'm like, oh, that's really cool, I'm gonna get around to working on that when I get a spare second.
Yeah.
A week later, it may as well have never happened because I do not remember what happened this morning, never mind a week ago. So I'm also gonna have to start keeping a list as well. Just a quick interruption before we get into the next question. Obviously, with this podcast comes a ton of recommendations from guests of either books or tricks, and logically I turn to MAGICBOX. Not only do they usually have exactly what I need, but I can get it the next day. Plus, Graham and the team really know their magic, so if I have any questions or queries about a product, they're ready to answer over the phone or email. And as a bonus for you listeners at home, you can also grab 10% off with the code PATCT. Just head to magicbox.uk.com and use the code at the checkout. Anyway, I just wanted to share that. Now back to the episode. Obviously, social media has played a massive role in increasing your notoriety within the magic community and leading to the likes of lectures at Blackpool and South Tyneside and various other places. In your opinion, do you think magicians should utilize social media? And if so, how can they be successful in doing so? Whether it be for promotional material or whether it be just to sort of document, like yourself, the stuff that they're working on and doing and seeing that progress, do you think it's of benefit?
I mean, for me, I would recommend it to anyone because it has changed my life completely. Like, as someone who's reserved, you know, a bit of an introvert, there was a stage where, you know, if my friends weren't going to school, I wouldn't go to school. Like, I was a really anxious kid. And so if you told me 12, 15 years ago that now I would be flying to Budapest by myself to perform and lecture over there, I'd have thought that you were nuts. So that all of that has come about from social media for me. And so I would recommend it to anyone just because it's had such a positive impact on my magic career. And like we said before, there are some, you know, cons in terms of there are a lot of trolls out there who will just comment negative things because they can. But ultimately, I think whether you want to use it for promotion or just to post clips of what you're practicing, I think, there's ultimately the pros outweigh the cons, in my opinion, because what have you got to lose from it? Like, you're only going to gain from posting. You might get a gig off the back of it, like I do, or it kind of depends on what your intention is. If your intention is to start a social media to build like a following, for example, that I think that's quite difficult to set out with that intention, because it's not easy to do, and it will take a while for you to see any kind of results. Whereas if you want to use social media just to promote and share stuff, and maybe all of that other stuff will come naturally, then yeah, I would recommend it, because it's only, benefited for me. I think to make it easier, I would say one of the things that has helped me is that I do magic and cardistry, but that's the only thing that I really post on my magic account. And so I think if you're trying to build a following, staying quite specific with the content that you post is important, because if you do start to gain followers, they're following you because they've seen things that you've posted that they like, if that makes sense. So then if you then switch and start posting something that's completely different, then, you should have like a target audience, so to speak. And it's kind of hard, because it was kind of like an accident that it happened. I didn't set out with the intention of having a following on social media. It was just my way of performing, because I didn't do it in live in person. And so I was posting these videos just because that was how I kind of showed what I could do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I get these kind of questions a lot, but because I didn't set out with the intention of like using social media in this way, I kind of feel at a loss for words, really, because I feel like I should know more, but I kind of just post, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
And again, that's another benefit of it not being your main income, is you don't have to rely on every single video getting views and every single video being something that people want to see and interact with. You can still have that creative freedom to just enjoy yourself when you're posting, and then you're not reliant on it being a viral video after viral video, because it is incredibly difficult to maintain that level of content, especially at a good consistency. So I think that's probably another thing
I think of is I don't want to make it about me being a woman in magic, but I feel like one of the things that helps on social media is if there's anything about the kind of content that you create that is kind of specific to you. And I know that there's hundreds of incredibly talented female magicians out there, but I feel like what attracted a lot of people to my kind of stuff initially was, maybe they hadn't seen a woman doing a lot of this kind of technically difficult stuff before, or not very many at least. And so I feel like if there's something about the content that you're creating that kind of stands out in any way, then I feel like that's one of the important things that I can think of to say in terms of social media. But otherwise, yeah.
It comes back to relatability. It's one of those things, people resonate with stuff that is relatable to themselves. But if you can find your niche, and if you can find something that helps you stand out, that other people can then relate to, then obviously that's going to help you massively. And as a benefit of that, you create a community of like-minded people who also want to do the same thing, who also enjoy the same content. And then you have that niche, and you have this group of people around you that support you for what you're doing, because they're on a similar path or a similar journey as well. And you're not just creating a following for the sake of a following. You're creating a community off the back of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, you have an absolute abundance of social media clips and lots of crazy stuff. And as we mentioned before, when you were going through trying to find a clip for us to use in the annotated segment, it was difficult because there's absolutely tons of them. But we did manage to narrow it down to one. And we're going to move into our annotated ERDNASE segment. We're going to take a quick look at that performance, and then we'll discuss exactly what your creative thinking was behind this routine and how it came about.
Here's one method that I use to locate a freely selected card from the deck. First, have a card chosen at random. In this case, we'll use the Jack of Hearts. You lose the Jack somewhere in the middle of the deck, like so, and then take any other card. In this case, it's the 10 of Diamonds, and we're going to use that to find the Jack. Spread the cards out and use the 10 of Diamonds to find the selected card.
There is an awful lot to discuss right there, because there is a lot of things happening that are nigh on invisible. There's a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes that people will never ever see or know. How did that sort of routine and idea come about, and why specifically, without obviously divulging methods, were those techniques that you put into play there the techniques that you decided to use in the end to create that overall effect?
So I think the initial kind of idea for why I wanted to post it was a bit stupid, really, because I was getting a lot of the comments that were like, you know, that I was gatekeeping, and that I was like, especially on TikTok, people I think expect tutorials more on that platform than any other. And so people were like, oh, I love the part where she tells us how it's done, you know, sarcastically. And so I thought, well, I'll post like a routine that's kind of like, I'm saying that it's a tutorial, and then it's just kind of another magic trick. And so it was kind of like a petty, I don't know.
Like a bait.
Yeah, I'd seen Leonard do something very similar. And so I knew that, like, you know, this was something that I could do with the moves that I knew quite easily. And, you know, as a content creator, trying to put out content as often as you can, and the idea pops into my head, I was like, yeah, okay, that's what I'll do today. And so it was kind of just like an off the cuff idea when I saw one of those comments. In terms of the moves involved, like watching it back was quite difficult because I wouldn't necessarily.
I noticed you immediately go, oh.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily use the same method today as I did then. I can't remember when it was. I think it was a few years ago now. But I kind of, yeah, I just thought, you know, I'll use a. I don't want to say too much. Don't know what. Was
it just the tool that sort of worked at the time, and therefore that was what sort of happened, or was it more so the thing that you'd most recently learned, therefore it was just at your disposal?
Yeah, it was kind of a mixture of the both. Like parts of the routine were moves that I'd known for a long time, and so it was just kind of like, I need this to happen, I'll just use this that I already know how to do. And part of it was I was working on kind of switching cards using these moves, and that was a routine that allowed me to practice that. But ultimately it was just kind of a fun, and plus I was kind of trying to in a lot of my videos I just kind of put music over the top, and you know, that's it. I'm not one for listening back to the sound of my own voice. Like, I probably won't watch this back because I'll just cringe too hard. And so I kind of wanted to try something different, and I thought, well, I'll record as I normally do, and then instead of putting music over the top, because a lot of magic tricks, you know, if you're going to post them on social media, they do require a bit of an explanation. Like if I just posted that clip and put music over the top, I feel like it would be quite difficult to follow what was going on.
Yeah.
You know, if you do a voiceover and you explain it, it's a lot more straightforward. But again, like I think I went about it in I probably should have just performed the routine and spoke as I did it. But that was just me at the time thinking, I'll just cringe so hard if, like, what if it's one take and I've got to like speak to the camera myself? Like, no, it feel too weird. So, but I don't know if you noticed when you watched it, but I feel like I was talking really fast as well, because obviously I recorded the routine and then I thought, okay, now I'll do the voiceover, and I realized that doing the voiceover, like, it didn't really fit, so I had to kind of explain things as quick as I could to make it fit.
The slides come thick and fast. It's difficult to try and narrate what's happening and also keep pace with what's happening in front of the screen at you at the same time.
Yeah. So it was a learning curve for me, because it was I think one of the first times that I'd used my own voice, and I don't know why I don't do it more often, because I get a lot of comments saying, like, you know, that's what I should do, especially if I'm looking to you know, move towards performing a little bit more. And yeah,
especially for gambling demonstrations. I think gambling demonstrations without any vocalization at all would be a long watch. How do you find a balance between learning new stuff and knowing when to appropriately post it? Because I know certainly for myself, if there's something new that I've learned, I immediately want to go to like my Instagram stories and be like, look at this cool thing that I just learned. Like, you guys need to see this. How do you find a balance between learning new stuff and keeping a consistent amount of like posting without just rushing into absolutely everything? Because I know when you've created like a good social media post, it's difficult to be like, okay, this has to go out on next Monday. And not just, I'm going to post this right now because I need the gratification.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I've been guilty of it myself. Like, I'll learn a new sleight and I'll finally get it down and like, right, okay, I'm recording something right now. I need to share it immediately because I'm so proud of myself. But it's one of those, like, after a while, you kind of get to the stage where you know yourself when it's ready, when it looks, if you, especially since I got the like 3-way practice mirror, if I'm practicing something now, so more than in the past, I'm better at knowing when it's ready to go out or when it needs a bit more work, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist myself. And so if I'm, you know, it could be like the slightest little thing, like my fingers moving a little bit too much when I execute a certain thing. And so I'm like, no, I need to stop that first. Even if the move works and it looks fine, if I spot something like that now, I'm like, no, I need to hold off for a bit. And so I think it depends. You know, if you practice a move, you know, it might be different for you than it is for me. But even today, I think if I bought something at Blackpool and got home and was really excited about it, I think I'd struggle to, like, you know, hold off and practice it a bit more first. But yeah,
it's a fine balance to sort of try and keep. If you had to guess, how many takes do you reckon is probably the longest takes you've done on a video for social media?
Probably more than I would care to admit. I think it was probably the one where, I don't know if you will have seen it, but it's one of the card to coin videos. And initially, like, I learned it by doing as Takumi does, 4 cards, 4 coins, and the 4 cards, as you deal them down, turn into the 4 coins. But because I have 8 what do you call it, $half, I thought, well, I'll just try 8 coins instead, like, see if it works. And so
Real easy.
And so I started practicing that, and it was kind of working, but kind of, you know, obviously you've got a lot more in palm than what you used to. And so because I knew I could already execute the move, I kind of jumped straight in with, well, I'm just trying the same thing with more coins. So I kind of started trying to film it immediately and realized then how difficult it was. And so I'm not going to say how many takes. It was a lot for that one.
Do you think it hit the triple digit? Or maybe not that much.
I don't think. Maybe. I don't know. Probably close, if not.
It's one of those things, especially with like multi-stage routines or multi-step things, especially when you're dealing, for example, 8 coins and cards. The mistake can come in at the first one, it could come in at the third one, it can come in at the 7th one. Like, there's no point in which there's a guaranteed, like, it might not work here. And because of that, you get so many, like, oh, I got this far and then had to start again.
Yeah, a lot of the time, like, I'd get it down and I'd be, I'd dealt all of them, it worked. And I'd be like, cool, okay. And I'd watch the clip back and realize how much I flashed, And, well, I guess that wasn't it. But again, it comes back to, like, I'm just doing it as a bit of fun while I practice. And so, even though it might be embarrassing, I sit there doing it, that one specifically, take after take after take, but it was just like a bit of fun. I don't think I'd ever actually perform, in a live performance, trying to turn the 8 cards into 8 coins. I've done 4, but I don't think I'd risk,
Very daunting task.
Yeah. So.
Fair play. Even 4 is still quite the task to do, especially when you're handling cards of this size and coins of this size. Like, the dexterity to be able to do that is absurd. So obviously, one of the other sort of avenues that you went down when you were exploring social media and obviously card stuff in itself is, as we mentioned earlier, cardistry. How do you think the cardistry scene has changed over the past few years? Obviously, it's grown exponentially. Lots of more people are getting into it, and the movements that have come out of it are disgusting, to say the least, in the best ways, but they're hideous. How do you think it's changed over the past few years, and where do you see the future of cardistry going to? At what point do we just get to the level where it's just too much?
Yeah, I think it's changed massively since it started. I don't know if I picked up cardistry as it was kind of taking off, or like, I don't really know when it started, but it was kind of as Instagram was first introduced. Unfortunately, I am that old. I was around at that time, and I remember it started off with things like the Sybil cut and, fairly simple kind of moves that you could use as a cut.
In the grand scheme of things. Not necessarily simple.
I think it started with moves that you could use as a cut, a fancy cut in Magic.
Like practical solutions to flourishes,
And then it kind of spiraled into this amazing kind of art in its own right, where, I see videos of people doing stuff today that just, like, it looks like it must be edited. Like, there's no way that that's possible. But like, arguably, I would say some of the cardistry moves are more difficult than some of the most difficult Magic that I've tried to learn. Like, and watching videos of people, I've never been to Cardistry Con, but watching videos of people there doing all of this stuff, making it look so easy. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Cardistry has its own convention now. I think it's only going to keep growing and growing, and the community will keep getting bigger, because there's still people today that, you'll post a cardistry video on TikTok and people are like, wow, where can I learn how to do this? They're interested in just getting started themselves. And so I think it's only going to grow. And I'm not the creative type that I could ever create a flourish or move myself. I think the amount of things that people have come up with to do now, like,
It's absurd. Absolutely absurd. When you're implementing cardistry into the stuff that you do, are you, as we mentioned there, using it for a practical purpose, or is it more just to visually aid what you're doing to add a artistic sort of creative flair, or does it depend on what the movement is?
I think at the moment for what I'm doing, it's kind of, if I'm actually performing magic, I don't tend to use a lot of cardistry because I'm kind of self-conscious of, I don't want it to look like I'm showing off or, you know, anything like that. So I'll try to handle the cards with, you know, grace and make it look smooth and whatever, but I don't want to, I'm just, not that I think anybody else who does use it is showing off, but I'm just kind of conscious of it myself. I might use, like, you know, one of the back flips. I can't remember what it's called, but, you know, I wouldn't do anything too extreme. Whereas if I practice it myself, it's kind of just for my own enjoyment and because I enjoy the art form on itself. So I think, you know, maybe someone might see me doing it and think, wow, that's cool. But I think it's magic in its own right. Like, you know, we've heard stories of magicians who are performing at gigs and, you know, they've done the most difficult routine that is in their set, and then someone sees them bring the cards and they're like, can you show my friend that thing?
Yeah.
You know?
So infuriating, but I guess that's one of those things, especially with the likes of social media nowadays as well. Those fast visual, like, dopamine hits are what people enjoy, and it's one of those things that, because I think magic's certainly becoming a little more mainstream now, not necessarily mainstream in the sense of like music and things like that, but a lot of people have seen a lot of magic, whereas cardistry is this new thing that's come out of it that initially looks like magic, and then you go, hold up, what is going on here? And yeah, it's a whole fresh take, and it still boggles me that some people purely practice cardistry and don't ever touch any of the sleight of hand stuff or don't ever perform. It's just a way of them expressing themselves through the movement of these 52 pieces of paper, which is another ball game in itself. And then the people that are taking cardistry and magic and fusing them together and doing the most ridiculous color changes and the most ridiculous sleights with cardistry is just, yeah, phenomenal to see.
Crazy, isn't it? Because I know of people who have started off in cardistry, discovered magic through that, and then now they're more of a magician than a cardist. And that, you know, flip it on its head, there are people who have started in magic, discovered cardistry through that, and now that's kind of their thing. And so it's crazy that it's kind of become a world of its own where people are, you know, just focusing on that, or, you know, it helps them discover something else. It's definitely changed.
Yeah, again, it's another avenue that people can sort of get into. Even if they don't like card tricks and things like that, it's still a fun way that they can express themselves. Even if they don't use cards, you can still use the trainer decks and the blocks, and it's just another thing that you can fidget with and enjoy and play with. And then you start looking at coin flourishes and all sorts of stuff. The sort of branches that intertwine together here are just ridiculous, and I think it'll be fun to see where cardistry and the likes of flourishing goes in the future, because I think as obviously the new generation of magicians comes in, we've come into this, obviously us being younger than the majority of magicians, we've come into this at a completely different point where we're learning from the likes of Daniel Madison, and we're learning from the likes of Zach Mueller and the guys behind the Fontaines and those kind of stuff, and Dan and Dave. Obviously that's a whole different ball game to the very classic magicians doing manip stuff with back palms and all sorts of other things. And I think it'll be nice to see what comes of that, because it's a constant development, and the stuff that the kids are coming up with nowadays is just ridiculous. Like, somebody needs to stop them because it's infuriating.
Maybe in the future there'll be, you know, at magic conventions at the minute, a lot of them, there's not, cardistry has its own convention because there's not really anything at the magic conventions that cater for it. But maybe in the future, you know, it'll be that big of a thing that magic conventions will start having lecturers where they're teaching cardistry.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it could be that big of a thing.
I think that would be nice to see. I think it broadens the opportunity for more people to get into the community as a whole, because at the end of the day, Magic incorporates absolutely everything, whether it's cards, coins, mentalism, cardistry. Like, it is one big thing, and for those finer things to be sort of segregated and having to have their own events, I mean, it's good, because it means the people who want to go there know they're going to be in that place with other like-minded people. But at the same time, it's nice for them all to also to feel accepted within the greater community in itself, because I think a lot of people now, when they see cardistry, still switch off, and they're like, wow, that's not Magic, that's just flicking cards around, that's just finger flicking nonsense, which again, maybe is more so towards the classic generation, but hopefully it's more accepted in the future.
It's a shame as well, because that people do switch off sometimes, because I think, you know, if I've done cardistry and someone's gone, wow, that's cool, and then I've done, you know, difficult sleight of hand, and they're like, wow, you know, how do you do that? But the two kind of link together. I think practicing cardistry helped me pick up the difficult sleight of hand a lot easier than I would have if I didn't practice any of that, because I was used to holding the cards in these kind of unusual ways, and so when it come to, you know, learning lateral palm, stuff that initially feels uncomfortable, it was a bit easier because I'm kind of used to using the cards in that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
100%.
You know, it's something that actually would help a lot of magicians if they ever wanted to, you know, dabble in cardistry. I think if you perform card sleight of hand, it is quite useful.
And as you said, like, it's one of those things that it's not taking away from your Magic. If anything, it's adding to it. And like you said, with card springs and card flicks and fans and things like that, people look at that and they appreciate the skill and the level that's gone into it. And they're like, wow, that's incredible. And it just adds to and heightens what you're already doing. So to look at that and go, no, it's not for me, is, it's a very sort of straight and narrow mindset, which I think needs to be opened up to a little bit more. And as you mentioned there, watching some of the cardistry tutorials and the hand and finger positions that you need to get into, like, it's like playing Twister with your hands.
Yeah.
It is not okay. But again, like you said, when it comes to learning some of the more knuckle-busting sleights, you know your hand can already get into those positions, or you feel comfortable in those weird positions because you know you've tried some of the stuff in the past. Even if you didn't necessarily get that cardistry move down, you still have a better understanding. And the more you can introduce yourself to, the more understanding you will have as well. So, yeah, if you haven't already, get yourself onto some cardistry tutorials, whether it's on Instagram or YouTube. Try something new. You might find it's a lot of fun, and it will benefit what you're doing otherwise. So, give it a blast. We're going to move into our second new segment, which is the question deck. And obviously, I sent you all of these questions in advance about this one because it's 52 cards. We don't know what question's coming. It could be absolutely anything. They range from prolific life questions all the way through to random things like, what is your favorite pizza topping? So this could be anything. So I'm going to riffle through these. There's not going to be any breaks, no forces, nothing funky. These have been shuffled meticulously throughout the day and obviously during this, but there's another one just in case anybody thinks they're stacked in any way. But you call out a stop, we have a look at what the question is, and we'll see what happens from there.
Stop.
Perfect. This is going to be our question, which is, how do you tailor your magic to different audiences?
That's actually a really good question, but you know, I thought maybe what if it's about magic, if I don't perform, like, will it even be relevant to me? But I have actually, my mum works at a primary school, and I think they were reading a book or something about a magician one time, and so my mum's thinking, oh, Ashleigh does magic. She'll be able to come into the school and, you know, do some magic for the kids one afternoon. And so she asks me, and in my head, I'm immediately thinking, you know, you practice snap deals and you know, all of this kind of heavy card magic, what am I going to do for kids that are 7, 8? You know, they're not going to be interested in any of this stuff. And so I had to kind of go back to the basics of when I first started in magic, before I knew any of this kind of slight heavy card stuff. I was buying, you know, how ways to get a coin into the bottle, you know, tricks like that. Kind of had to go back to the basics and think, what would kids find interesting? And you know, it was my mum. It's not like it was a paid gig. I was kind of doing it a favor to the school, so there was no pressure. But I did have to think, you know, I knew immediately these kids are not going to be interested in any of the stuff that I like to do at the minute. So I had to kind of come up with something different. And I think
so critical as well.
Right?
Kids are so happy to call out your double lift or call out thread or absolutely, they're brutal. Absolutely brutal.
So I had I brought Sucker Punch with me as well. You know, visual stuff that I thought, even if they don't understand all of it, if it looks good, they'll be like, wow, okay, well, hopefully that's what I was thinking. And it went well. And they asked me to come back and do it again the next year. So it must have worked. But that was kind of where I had to think, the stuff I normally do is not going to work.
You sharp realize, especially when you're performing for kids, that it is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
One reason I don't like performing for kids.
I didn't realize how difficult it was going to be until I was there. Like while I was there, I remember thinking, what have I done? Like, I want to say no, like, because what would I say to my mom? Like, sorry, mom, but I don't want to do it.
These kids are too daunting. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, so I was like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And I did, you know, I did enjoy it. It was different. It's not my favorite type of gig to work. If I got another, you know, if someone from the outside approached me and said, can you do my kids' party? I'd probably have to politely decline. It's not the kind of stuff that I would enjoy doing normally, but
there's still so much to learn from being in those uncomfortable situations, though. Like things that you would never learn if you were just doing it for friends or family or like paid gigs or social media. Like those uncomfortable situations have a lot of learning curves, and normally very steep learning curves.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially with kids. This has been an absolutely phenomenal conversation. There's lots of insights that I'm certainly going to take for myself, and hopefully the listeners at home have enjoyed this as well. Where can our listeners find you, and what are your plans for the future?
So I post most often on my Instagram and my TikTok account. So if you're interested in seeing anything that I do, that's probably a good place to find me. I am lecturing more in the UK later this year, beginning of next year, so that, you know, I'll post about them on there. So I'm doing bits and bobs more than what I used to do, but you know, predominantly it is still kind of a social media based thing. In the future, I think now that I've kind of stepped into the idea of performing more, like going to Budapest, doing Blackpool, South Tyneside, all things that I never thought in a million years I would even be asked to do, let alone accept, because it was just a hobby for me. And after doing that, I thought, wow, this is actually, you know, pretty great. As scary as it was and as like nerve-wracking as it was, I did love doing it. I came back like, I can't believe I've just done that. And so, you know, I am swaying towards, I would love to do more of that stuff. So hopefully, you know, get myself out there a bit more and, you know, see what happens if anything else comes of it.
Look forward to seeing it. Well, it's been an absolutely phenomenal conversation. We're getting late on into the night here, unbeknownst to the people that are listening to this at 5 p.m. But it's been phenomenal. So thank you so much for spending your time here and giving the incredible insights that you have today.
Thanks for inviting me on. It's been fun.
No problem. It's been an absolute pleasure. Obviously, if you guys have enjoyed it at home, please do remember to leave a comment. If you're watching this on YouTube, let us know what you've learned. If you've taken up Cardistry or you're learning something new, let us know what you're working on in the comments, and we'll be sure to check that out. If you want to, leave a 5-star review. It certainly helps us, and lets me know that we're doing a good job. But otherwise, we will catch you guys in the next one. Goodbye.